I'll just take a minute and wait for some people to show up. I am so excited. Today we are going to be painting some eucalyptus together. We're going to do this. So we're going to do 4 different eucalyptus branches. I felt like eucalyptus was a nice kind of somewhat wintry botanical, even though technically not much grows in the winter, but we're going to pretend it's growing right now. I guess depending on your hemisphere, it might be growing. We have some friends in Australia, and I'm sure that there's a lot of eucalyptus growing there. So, okay, so let me talk through some supplies. I'm going to switch to the overhead view real quick. You like my low-tech setup here? I know there's some fancy software you can get that does like the automatic transitions, but I got to keep things simple these days. So I just flip the camera manually. So I'm going to use a pencil. I have a natural black wing pencil today. I have 2 different brush sizes. I'm going to use a size 6 and a size 2. I have a sheet of 12 by 12. This is cold press paper by Arches, but honestly, use whatever size you have. That's going to be totally fine. Move this real quick. Also, if you guys wouldn't mind, can you let me know how the audio sounds? Hold on 1 second. Let me put this here. I have done classes in the past where the audio was like glitching the whole time. It's like nobody told me. Okay, so I'm going to use 4 different paint colors today. I'm going to use yellow ochre, sap green, ultramarine blue, and burnt sienna. Get this angle right for you guys. Okay. So what I'll do today is I'm going to do the most simple of simple sketches. This is going to be so approachable. I think anybody can sketch this. But what we're going to kind of think is just try and create 4 sort of balanced branches here. So we'll start over here on the left side. And I'm going to do a shape. I'll start at the bottom. And it's going to be kind of in the shape of almost like a question mark. So just like that. And then next to it, let's do one here. I'm trying to make sure it feels balanced. This one's going to be more straight, but not too straight. It's a branch, so we want it to feel kind of natural and organic. And then we have 2 more down here. So this one will be pretty much the same as that one. Maybe instead of going that direction, it can just kind of be more straight or going over towards the left to the right side a little bit. And then one last one here. So this branch is going to be this one's going to be more of like the circular shape. This one will have a lot of little leaves on it. So I'm going to kind of think about maybe like a Y shape at the top. And then we'll do a couple of branches going to the right and left. All right. I'm going to take a quick drink of coffee real quick. Oh man, if you guys could have seen, just right before this video started today, I lost track of time and I was just with my kids and my husband making breakfast and stuff, and then I looked at the clock. I was like, oh my gosh, my live class starts in 10 minutes. You guys gotta go. So it was like kind of chaos getting them out the door and getting everything ready, making sure I had everything I needed here. I feel like I'm still a little bit winded, but we're here, we're good. Okay, so let's get started with some paints. I know that's like the most simple sketch ever, and it's going to be great. It's going to be such a, I would say it's a simple tutorial. There's going to be some moments that are harder than others, but I think for the most part, it's going to be really approachable for any skill level. And yours does not have to look exactly like mine does. I want you to just kind of embrace the process, have some fun, and yeah, we won't be too tied to the outcome. One way you could definitely do this, if you feel sort of intimidated about, getting all 4 of them right, you could just use a bunch of smaller sheets of paper. If you have, just a few small loose pieces of paper, you could just practice these along with me so you don't feel pressure, like I said, to get all 4 of them perfectly, looking perfect together as a set. So just that little quick caveat. I want this to be fun for you guys. I don't want anybody to feel intimidated. So I have my water here. I got a paper towel. I don't know if you can see those. And I'm going to get started with some yellow ochre. Get some mixed right here. And some sap green. And I think I'm going to lean a little bit heavier on the yellow ochre side. And we're going to start with this one right here. Make sure there's a good amount of water in this mix. So yellow ochre and sap green. And then what I'll do here is we'll start at this top here. We're going to go bum, 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 bum. And I'm going to start by doing a long leaf. So I'm going to press down and then kind of lift up at the end. Something that probably would have been wise was to tape this down first, but that's okay. The longer I paint, this is going to sound funny, and I'm sure some people would majorly disagree with me, but so when you use a lot of water on a piece of paper, it's going to start to buckle and get kind of warped. And when I was first starting painting, that thought was really horrible to me, and I always was like taping it down so it was so flat. I think for a looser painting like this one is, I don't mind a little bit of warp. I think it makes it more interesting. And I feel like, I'm just going to go on a quick soapbox, but I feel like everything is always moving towards like so polished, so perfect, digital art, AI art. I like it when you can see the imperfections in art. I love when you see pencil markings. I love when the paper buckles a little bit. I love when it feels like an actual human made the art. So I'll just say that for whatever that's worth. Okay, so let's do another little leaf here. This one will be going upwards over towards the right. So the technique is start light and then push down and then lift up. And you'll get that awesome shape there. Over here, I'll do another one that's kind of hiding behind this one. Give it some nice movement. Press down, pull back towards the center. Just use that nice point. And I am using my size 6 brush for this. I don't know if I mentioned that. I'm going to add a little bit more green to my mix here. And I just don't want all of my leaves to be the exact same color. I love to create variety, and I love for there to be contrasting colors, just not just all the same color. I think that's what gives a painting a lot of life and a lot of depth. So we'll do one that's kind of going up, maybe over here towards the right side. We'll do a little tiny leaf right here. Let's do one right here. So start light, press down, and then lift up. Sorry if my hand is kind of covering that technique. As I was editing videos recently, I realized like my hand can really get in the way a lot of times. So I'm going to try and be mindful about that. So press down, lift up. And then let's do a couple more. I'm going to add even a little bit more green to my mix. So we'll do one right here, and then one more over here. So start light, press down. And while some of these little leaves have a little bit of paint in them still, I'm going to drop some of this, just like a little bit more of a concentrated mix of that green into, oh, see, that one's already dried. So is that one. Oh my goodness. These are drying quick. How about that one? So you can kind of look, like lean over towards the side. You can see where there's still a little bit of moisture on these leaves. And just add a few little moments of some extra depth. That looks great, doesn't it? Just adding those little tiny moments, I feel like it gives it so much more interest just already. So I will let that dry. Let me do one last thing. Switch to my smaller brush, my size 2, and I'm going to use just this nice fine point. Let's see if I can do this without getting in the way here. I'm going to go and paint the stem. You can add a little bit of extra depth to that if you want to. I'm going to go ahead and make mine pretty dark. So I'm leaning a little bit heavier on the sap green color. And we'll come back, we'll add a few more details in a little bit. One last thing I will do, I'm going to add just a couple little stems going over here towards the left. They're like little parts that are just like the base of a leaf. Does that make sense? Let that dry. Okay, so cleaning my brush off, we're going to get another color mixed here. So we're going to work on this one here, and this is kind of a seeded eucalyptus. So it's, I guess it's a eucalyptus that's kind of gone to seed. I painted this original painting, the one that I'm referencing, so many years ago, and I don't really remember what references I used or even what types of eucalyptus they are. Oops. Grab some sap green. So mix some sap green and some blue. And if you don't have those exact colors, just use blue and green. Whatever blue and green you have, you probably have at least one blue and green on your palette. So I'll mix these two, try and do like kind of a 50-50 mix. I might actually lean a little bit more towards the blue, but play it by ear. Bring a lot of water. And this is a really fun one. This is one of my favorites. I like them all for different reasons, but this one is just some really fun details, and I think this one has some nice contrast as opposed to the other ones, because this one has these little teeny details. Okay, so using my size 6 brush, a watery mix of both sap green and ultramarine blue. I'll move this out of the way for a second. So what I'll do, I think I'm going to start a little bit higher than my sketch. I think I'm going to start like maybe 1.5 inches from the top. And what I'm going to do is draw these tiny little seeds. And that feels a little bit dark, so let me blot that. And what we're going to try and be intentional to do is kind of have a mix of light seeds and darker seeds. And the way we get lighter seeds is just to blot some of that color. So it's a little bit of a diluted mix. You could even add a little bit more water. We just don't want them all to be the exact same value, so the same level of darkness or lightness. We want there to be variety. So you can just blot it. And the general shape of this this plant here is kind of like the shape of a lilac. So kind of think about it in those terms. And what we're painting is sort of these little clusters of seeds. Nothing too perfect. It's not the most precise technique here or application. But in general, just kind of think about creating these little clusters that are almost like creating these little star shapes. Sometimes the clusters only have 2, sometimes they have 5 or 6. And so as I paint, it gets a little bit lighter because I'm obviously using up the color. So just reach over and grab a little bit more blue-green color. Blot it if it looks too dark. And another trick you can do that's kind of fun is if there's a spot here where you have too much paint, just grab it, just touch it. And what's going to happen is your brush is going to grab that color, suck it up into the bristles, and then you can move it around, paint it somewhere else. Just thinking here. And I don't want it to feel too perfect and uniform. So I think I'm going to start making some that go out just a little bit further out towards the left here. And the fun thing about not using a sketch is that everybody's paintings are going to turn out just a little bit different. Even my painting, I'm trying not to replicate the reference I have because I want it to feel like it's just a unique painting for this moment. I think sometimes when I, just copy paintings that I've done before for tutorials, it's not that I don't enjoy it, because I definitely do. I always enjoy painting, but there is something really satisfying about creating something that isn't just an exact copy, but with all the details exactly the same. There's a time and place for both, but I'm enjoying creating something that feels a little bit more natural and organic and just something unique to this exact moment. And so I'm going to take some of that dark blue color, and I'm going to go over some of the spots. Like, I want to keep it, some of these little seeds really light, and then I want to make some of them really dark. So I'll grab just a really concentrated mix of that bluish green paint, drop it in just a few spots. I love the contrast, those really light blue moments and then the really dark blue as well. And then the medium. Some of them are more of a medium value. It's going to make it look so much more dynamic and interesting. You can blot it off. You can create some that are like the lightest. Just drop your brush in your water, blot it on the paper towel, and you're going to have like the lightest blue to just add into a few moments here and there. Okay, I'm going to switch to my smaller brush for a second. So switch to the size 2 brush. I'm going to go back to my blue mix here on the palette, and using this really nice fine tip, I'll start up here and let's place that stem. So we'll paint over that pencil marking, and then let's also start creating these lines that are connecting all of these little seeds. You don't have to connect every single tiny seed, but maybe just kind of connect to those clusters. Add one little extra seed right there, needed that. And I love how I'm looking over at my reference, and something I did differently here is this stem has a little bit more warp to it. Actually, I'm glad I did that. Details like that make it feel so much more natural, I think. Okay, so there we go. We have our seeds in there, our stem, and then we're going to do one last detail for this one here. So this is a really fun part. So I'm just going to use some water, and I'm using my size 6 brush. So just water, mostly just water. It might be a little bit of paint in here still, but for the most part, just water. And we're going to paint in a leaf on each side here, just with water. So we'll start with one. You can definitely see that there's some water in that, or some blue in that, and that's fine because we're about to make it all blue. So I'm going to use this mix here before this dries, which it's not going to dry too quickly. And I'm going to just drop in some paint along the bottom side and along the top. And doing it like this, putting the water down first and then dropping paint into it, that is the best way to create these natural watercolor blooms that are so interesting and so beautiful and help to create kind of that loose effect in a painting. Let that dry. Clean off my brush, and then I'm going to do another one on the right side. So here's another leaf. We'll make this one maybe going upwards a little bit more. Do it however you want to do it. Grab a little bit more paint. My paint is running out of paint, so I have to keep mixing more. Okay, so I'm going to drop it over here on the bottom side and on the top side. Maybe I'll drop a little bit here just along the center. And then I'm going to let the water kind of do its thing. See how that dries in just a minute. I think I might actually move just a tiny bit, add just a tiny bit more water to it to help encourage that movement. Okay, so now let's move over to this one right here. Okay, so this one we're going to do a very similar color palette to this one. So this one will be that blue and the green. So I'm going to get a little bit more mixed here because I used quite a bit in that seeded eucalyptus there. So I'm going to grab a little bit more ultramarine blue and a little bit more sap green. Okay. All right. So it's a nice dark mix here. And I'm going to grab some more water, bring some water into this mix here, to this little puddle. Okay, so now I'm going to do a watery mix here. I want to start light and go darker and darker. Actually, one more suggestion. I would lean a little bit heavier on the blue. My mix looks like it's 50-50. I actually want it to be more like, let's say maybe more like 70-30. I know there's no way to really be precise about that, but let's just lean a little bit heavier on the blue side. And getting a really watery mix here going. I'm going to start maybe like 1.5 inches from the branch right above it. And I'm going to paint in a circle. I believe that this type of eucalyptus here is called baby blue. If anybody knows in the chat, you should let me know if you know what all these ones are called. I know the next one is called silver dollar, but I believe this one's called baby blue. And so we're going to do that shape right there. And right away, I'm going to grab a little bit of extra dark. And I'm just going to drop it here in a couple spots. Okay. Underneath it, I'm going to use just water. It's going to be very blue still. I'm going to paint this shape here, and then I'm going to paint another one just behind it. So baby blue eucalyptus. Every one of these little leaves kind of has its partner on the other side. They're very symmetrical feeling all the way down. So we're going to try and create that effect. And I'm going to drop a little bit of dark color on this outer edge and on this side. I kind of kept a little streak of paper in between those two. That's kind of a tricky technique there, so don't even worry about it if yours doesn't, if it's all bleeding together, it's still going to look amazing. I'm going to use a little bit more water. I'm going to paint in, let's do 2 leaves that are kind of flat. So we're seeing like a side angle of these 2. Okay, so we'll do one there, one there. And then again, I'm going to do that same sort of technique there, where I'm going to drop in a little bit of extra dark blue here, and just how about on the right and left side, we'll just drop in a little bit of that extra dark pigment. And using my clean brush again, I'm going to paint in another circle here. And I am going to go ahead and touch those leaves and let that color bleed into this one as well. Just underneath it. Well, actually, yeah, just underneath it, I'm going to grab more water. And we're going to do 2 more of these same, kind of like this one here, where they're a little bit more flat. But again, we're kind of trying to think about creating balance. All of them have their little partners. And I'll grab a little bit of blue and drop that in here as well. I will say that this one looks like the most simple. I find that this, for whatever reason, I feel like this branch is actually the trickiest. I don't exactly know why. Maybe just the way I try to paint it. Every single time I've recreated this painting last night, and when I recreated it, I was like, oh my goodness, this one's actually a little bit harder than I thought it would be. And it turns out different every time. So if you feel like you don't love how yours is turning out, do it again. Okay, so we're gonna do I think we'll do, how about one more here? So we'll do sort of, I'm just gonna go ahead and use the blue mix right there. Don't be afraid to let it touch the other leaves. And then what if we did just the hint of one behind it? And later on we can come back and we can accentuate details. Okay, and then I'm going to take I'll just use the same brush here. I'm going to drop in the stems. And then there's one last thing I want to do here. I'm going to grab some extra dark mix here, and I'm going to, just along this side here, add this darker leaf that's kind of peeking out from behind this one. I'm letting that color bleed together. I think it's all looking really nice. I'm going to grab just a little bit more of that blue mix, and in a couple places I'm just going to drop like basically just little dots of this dark mix. And I'm going to let it just move throughout these leaves. We're really letting the water have a moment with this flower here, or with this leaf here. Okay, so let's let that dry. We'll come back. More to do with this one. One last thing, I feel like this is, I want to smooth out that leaf right there. I'm going to just smooth that blue out there too. Cool. Okay, last one, and then we'll do our final details throughout the whole painting. And as I'm looking back at this one, I love how that one dried. I didn't even look at it till now, but I love how both of those leaves look. They have such a beautiful, like, watery quality to them. I love painting in a wet on wet style, so dropping the water first and then adding the paint. I think that there's a way to use a wet on wet loose style, but still use a lot of, I would say, have a lot of intentionality and a lot of control still. I think when people hear the term loose painting, they kind of think of something that feels so abstract you can't even tell what it is. But there's a way. There's definitely a way. So let's move on to our last branch here. And so this one, we're going to do a mix of the more greenish leaves like we did here, and then some blue leaves as well. And then we will also bring in more of like an orange stem. So this is going to be one of the more colorful moments in this whole painting here. So I will get started by, let's bring some water back to this mix, reactivate your greenish yellow mix here. Again, this was yellow ochre and sap green. Get that going. And I think what I'll do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start just dropping these kind of circular shapes that are similar to this one, but maybe let's make them a tiny bit smaller. And you'll see, I'll show you my process here. So I'm going to get started over here, about like again about 1.5 inches from this one. And let's start with kind of a yellowish green leaf. That's the side angle of a circular leaf. And then I'm going to clean that off. I'm going to grab a little bit of blue now. And just right next to it, let's do more of a blue leaf. And just underneath it, I'm going to do another one. And I'm going to let the color bleed into it. I don't mind any bleed that might happen here today. Drop a little bit more blue into that one. Okay, let's do another one here. That's kind of the side angle of one. And I am trying to think intentionally about changing up the color just a little bit with each leaf that I paint. Reach a little bit into the green for the next one. And this is your painting, so you can decide how much you want your leaves to touch one another, or if you want them to be kind of standalone. My big encouragement is to make sure that we're having a mix of shapes. So some of them are going to be more circle. Some of them are going to, you know, from the side, they'll look more oval. And the more they turn, you know, the more of a thin kind of disc shape you're going to get. Come over here. Do a few more. Maybe drop a little bit of blue into that one. Do a large one right here, more of a true circle. And then another one just next to it that's also maybe a little bit more slanted, that disc shape there. I'm going to do another large one right here in the center. Trying to keep it watery. Another one just next to that one. I'm going to go ahead and let them overlap a little bit. Let's do a thin one. I love the disc-shaped ones. I feel like they just give this composition as a whole a lot more interest. Let's see, I'll do one right here, and then just a few more here at the bottom. So I'll do one right here, one right next to it, one more disc-shaped one. Go ahead and touch into that blue, and then one more here. So many varieties of this. You could do so many different styles, and it would look different every time. Just keep on painting it if you don't like how yours turned out. The trick is really just variety, I think. Changing up the color, changing up the shapes. I don't want it to look too perfectly circular. I'll add just like the hint of one back here as well. Okay. Cleaning off my brush. I'm going to let that one dry before I do anything else, because like I said, I'm going to do a burnt sienna for the stems, but I don't exactly want the burnt sienna to bleed into the leaves, so I'm going to let that dry. And we're going to go back and add some more details to our other ones. So let's go back up to this top one. I'm happy with how this one is looking for sure. I really like it. So I'm going to grab my smaller brush. I'm going to grab this green mix here, so some yellow ochre, sap green. There's a delivery person here. How many of you guys are also getting all kinds of Christmas presents delivered right now? We actually had our car broke down this week, so I had to kind of switch to delivery for all of the Christmas presents I've ordered. So everything's on Amazon, or just whatever I can do for local pickup, or local delivery, I should say. Anyways, let's go back to this one here. So notice how we have these two leaves overlapping. I don't know if yours looks exactly like mine does, but if there's any moments in this painting of yours where there's leaves that are overlapping, I'm going to drop a little bit of a darker green, the same color, just a little bit of a more concentrated mix of it. And I'm just going to add a little bit of that color to that leaf. And another detail I want to add is I want you to just, using this thin, blot that's a little too dark, a little bit too much mix, I should say. I'm going to do a very diluted green, and I want to add the detail of just that center line spanning the length of these leaves. So you can kind of mix up how dark you want it to be. But I think just that added detail of that center vein, it just really helps to take this leaf from looking maybe a little bit flat to having a little bit more interest, a little bit more dimension. Small details like that make a huge difference. I'm adding a little bit of extra dark green, well, yellow green, just this mix, which is sap green and yellow ochre. And again, here at the bottom, let's add a little bit of extra depth to these bottom leaves. Adding a lot of extra darkness to that darker mix to this bottom leaf over here on the left side, a little bit here just towards the center, and then again I'm just adding a little bit more depth to the stem. I think the stem just needs a little bit more emphasis. And let's do something fun now. So I'm gonna get some burnt sienna, burnt sienna mixed. Let's get that color going here. And I'm going to grab just a little bit of ultramarine blue. So I'm going to get kind of just a nice neutral brown color when I mix blue and burnt sienna. And the reason it's giving me a neutral is because I'm mixing orange and blue is going to create a very neutral color. So now I'm going to do just this really fun detail here. So these little tiny like stems that I drew earlier that were just floating by themselves, I want to add some little seeds that kind of match those ones we did there. You can do 3 or 4 of them or 2 of them. Love it. Small detail, but I think it brings a lot of interest. I'm bringing just a tiny bit more blue. And I'm using my small brush here just so you know. Okay, clean that brush off. And then let's take inventory here of this one here. So I think that one thing I could do for sure is just add a little bit more depth. I say this every time. Sometimes I feel like a broken record, but you know, I am teaching the same thing over and over. But watercolor dries light. It sometimes it looks really dark when you paint, but we gotta go in and add some extra depth if we really want to get those dark values. So I'm mixing my blue and my green together, and I'm going to bring this very dark mix into a few of these little seeds. We want just a little bit more drama. Not trying to cover up all of it, obviously, maybe 15 to 20% of the seeds. I'm just adding this little moment of some extra dark value. And I would love to hear. So I think live we have like 25, 26 people watching live. I would love to know how many of you guys are, if you're painting along with me. If you're painting along with me, let me know. Or let me know if you're just watching this time. Sometimes I love to just watch tutorials. I feel like you can really get a lot out of just watching, even without painting along. So I'm adding a little bit of depth to my stem. And oh yeah, I like how this is looking good. Love adding those extra dark values at the end. Okay, so then I'm going to go back to these leaves. And so these are dry now. So this is a wet on dry application is what we call this. But I'm just adding a tiny bit of definition to my leaves just by kind of adding some depth to these, like kind of where the center vein would be. Maybe a little bit on the bottom. Don't want to overdo it. I really love those like beautiful water blooms that we get, so I don't want to cover all of that. Okay, looking over, Sam says, such a relaxing painting session, so perfect for this time of year. Sam, you're so sweet. I have never gotten a message or comment from you, Sam, that wasn't like, oh, she's so sweet. And Claudia, my eyes, my computer's all far away. Claudia says she's painting along. I'm so glad. And AZ Knitter, watching now, we'll paint later. Love it. So fun. Yeah, I thought that eucalyptus felt like a very soothing leaf to paint for right now. I feel like everybody's so stressed out around Christmas, and it's kind of a bummer because it's just supposed to be such a beautiful, peaceful, comforting time of year, and it is, but I think that maybe I'm preaching to myself here, but I think we kind of let, I don't know, busyness and consumerism and obligation just sort of, I don't know, sometimes I feel like it can rob us of that peacefulness and joy. So I hope this is a moment of just some peace and relaxation. It certainly is for me. I love painting. I have not had a lot of time to paint lately. It's felt like, I don't know, some of you might have young kids too, but it's hard. You kind of got to find those little margins in life where you have a moment. Anyways, I could talk about that for hours. D says, I'm painting along. I'm so glad you are. Okay, so let's go back to this one here. Like I said, this is our challenging one. For me, it's the challenging one. I'm going to grab a little bit more of this blue mix, and since this is probably mostly dry, mine is cool but definitely dry, so I can add paint to it. I'm going to add some depth to the back leaf. So it looks like that one is kind of cast into shadow just a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of definition to my stem here. And then where these two leaves are meeting here, I will go ahead and add some darkness to the back side of that leaf. I don't want to cover everything. I just want to accentuate some shadows, some shading. Let's see here. So this one here, I'm going to make this stem. It makes sense that you would see the stem right there. I'll go ahead and just drop it, kind of like I did over here, just a few little moments where it might feel nice to just add a little bit of that darker value. I don't want to do too much though. I'm just sort of trying to articulate the shapes, I guess, of our, actually, yeah, that feels pretty good. Okay, I'm just thinking here for 1 second how I want to do this leaf. So, okay, I'm sure your painting looks different than mine. But like I said, I'm always trying to think with these kinds of with the baby blue eucalyptus, trying to think about making sure that, we're always kind of matching, mirroring the two leaves. so this one, we're going to assume that we can't see the back leaf here. Okay, over here, let's see here. This one, I'm going to add, so I'm going to articulate the shape of the leaf right there. So I'm creating this one a shadow here. And down here, I'll make this back one also in shadow. So work slowly here. Think about what makes sense. You kind of have to use some critical thinking skills here. You always do. It's not like you can ever suspend your critical thinking skills when you're painting with watercolor. You definitely have to think about what you're doing and think about how to achieve the effects you want to get. So it's relaxing, and sometimes it can be a little bit mindless to paint, but most often I feel like I definitely have to use a lot of my brain. Okay, so I feel like I'm happy with how this one is turning out. I hope you are too. If you're not happy with it, what you can do is just try it again. Maybe you can reference mine a little bit more closely next time. I'll definitely post in the blog post that you can reference below this video. I will definitely upload a closer shot of all of the details if you want to use that as like a closer reference. I know that can be really helpful. Real quick, I'm just adding a little bit of water to those spots where I dropped paint. Just because you guys know I like my paintings to feel really soft and natural, smooth gradients. Okay. Add a bit of shading right there as well, just to the underneath this leaf here. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to actually make this stem, I'm going to make it cross over that leaf. I think for whatever reason that feels right to me. Just make sure your leaf is dry if you do that technique where you draw the stem over it, or else it's just the water is going to take it and go just bleed it everywhere. Okay, so we'll let that dry. Once it's dried, I'm going to see how much pencil markings I can erase from it. So we're about to go to our last one. Looking over at the chat, Christine says, I'm painting along with my daughter. Oh, that sounds awesome. I love that. I want to paint with my daughter one day. Barbara says, always watch first, then paint on replay. I'll add this one to my kitchen display with herb paintings you taught through Michael's some time ago. Oh yeah, these actually would fit really well with those herb paintings. Very similar in detail, I think, too. Okay, so our last branch here that we want to add details to. So let's go back to our burnt sienna mix. Let's just activate that burnt sienna. I'm using my smaller brush. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about connecting all of these little leaves to the center, okay? We're kind of just always trying to bring it back towards the center. So the small ones, you probably want to connect them to these longer stems that we have. You can decide here too if you want to make your stems cross over. I think I'll make this one crossover. Okay. I feel like it's always so hard for me to talk while I'm painting stems. I have to keep my hands so steady. So make sure you're doing this with your smallest brush here. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot to mention. I think probably most of you guys who are watching live, you guys are probably already inside of Bloom Watercolor Club. But if you are not, or if you're watching the replay later, I want you guys to know that January 8th, I'm going to reopen my membership called Bloom Watercolor Club. And it'll be open, I think we're going to do 3 days, maybe 4 days, I can't remember. I think 4 days. It'll be open for 4 days. And inside of the membership, I have about 50 hours of exclusive tutorials. And we have like this amazing community. Many of you guys are here today. So grateful for you guys. I love the community. Everybody's so encouraging and sweet. But we've done a watercolor challenge. We did that recently in the beginning of December, a 12-day challenge. That was super fun. So yeah, it's just a great place if you're looking for a little bit more community and encouragement and exclusive tutorials. If you want to kind of invest in your art practice, this is the place to be. So I think I have the link below. If I don't, I'll be sure to add it. And if you're not on my email list, make sure that you're over there, and I'll let you know when the doors open. But I'm excited. I'm actually really grateful for this membership. I was on Patreon for many years, and Patreon was great. I definitely don't want to throw any shade at it, but I think just having my own platform has been really life-giving to me personally, and I think I've just brought a lot more energy to it, a lot more enthusiasm, and I don't know, I'm just excited. I feel like this membership has attracted a lot of amazing people. So thank you guys if you're already in there, and I would love to see you in there if you're not in there. Okay, so I think this feels pretty good. Oh, I missed one. Probably missed a couple. This one just floating by itself. Notice I did just a couple little branches that are maybe leading to these leaves that are kind of, maybe they've fallen off. I just love little details like that. And I do want to add just a little bit more definition, because I think that although the leaves look pretty, I think that it's lacking depth. So right now we have some light tones, some medium tones, and now we want to bring a little bit of extra depth. So I'll use my medium-sized brush, my size 6 brush. I'm going to take a quick drink of my coffee because it's totally got cold. Story of my life. My coffee's always just like, I always forget about it, and then it's just all lukewarm. Still tasty though. Sam, you're so sweet. Highly recommend. Thank you. I'm so glad you're in there. Okay, so let's see here. I like to start at the top, and I don't want to make every leaf darker, just a few. So why don't we think about a few that it would just make sense for them to be a little bit darker. So I'm adding water. I'm going to add a little bit of mix here. And I'm just going to drop in a little bit of that darker value right there. And honestly, you don't even have to, if you don't want to, you can drop water first. You could also just paint it. I think that's what I'm going to do. So the spots where leaves are overlapping, that's always going to be a really great natural place for there to be some shadow. Right here as well. So I'm going to drop it, and then I'm going to come back and smooth that out. Right here. And then right here where these two are overlapping. Cleaning off my brush, blot it, and then we'll smooth that out. So those spots where I dropped that color, smooth it out, make it feel nice and natural, give it that nice gradient. I love it. I feel like even just adding those, what is that, little 7 moments of darker color, 8 moments, 7 moments, it adds just so much more depth to this painting, and I love it. I will go back to a couple more leaves, and I will do that kind of wet on wet application here. So I'm just going to wet that leaf. I'm going to wet this one over here, a couple of the bigger ones. And how about this top one? And I'll grab some of this green here. I'll drop that in there. We're just giving these leaves a little more life, I think, just by doing this. That's what a leaf really looks like. You know, leaves aren't flat. They have inconsistencies and variation. And I want to try and capture that. And I think watercolor is such a great medium to capture those beautiful little natural looking moments that we see in nature. What else? Add just a tiny bit more green to this leaf tip. Smooth that out. This leaf here is kind of floating, so I'll connect it to that branch there. And let's see, is anybody else left floating? I think that feels good. I feel like this table is so shaky. I'm sorry for the unstable camera today. Sometimes it feels really stable and sometimes I don't know what's going on. I'm going to add a tiny bit more depth of green up here. And that feels good. And actually, I don't even see any spots where I need to erase any pencil. I think there's a few spots here. But, you know, I want to wait like 10 minutes before I erase anything there. And there is a spot here where I could try to erase. So I typically use F pencils for whenever I sketch. I think they're really great because you're able to erase quite a bit. You're never really able to fully erase pencil markings if they're underneath your painting. And if you use a ton of pencil, it makes it even more difficult. And the more layers you paint subsequently over the pencil markings, the more difficult it is to erase it. So just keep that in mind. These Blackwing natural pencils, these are pretty great for erasing as well. But yeah. Okay, so I think I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out. I think I might give it to my mom. My mom and dad, they have a couple of rental properties that they do for like Airbnb. And my mom is always asking me for art for her rentals. So I'm always like, sure, mom, sure, mom. Like, so there's like all kinds of originals of my paintings and I always forget about them. Last time I went to one of her rentals, I was like, oh yeah, there's like 10 of my originals in here. Okay, so Runaway says, this is the first time YouTube has shown this creator. Aw, that's awesome. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for stopping in. And just thank you everybody for watching, whether you're painting along or not. I really appreciate it. This will be my last tutorial of 2025. So let me think if there's any last things I want to say here. Yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed. I guess that's all I have to say. Be sure, if you wouldn't mind, can you guys give this video a thumbs up or a comment? Because I think that helps people find it in the algorithm, which, you know, we always have to bend the knee to the algorithm, right? And yeah, I just love creating for you guys, and I'm always so grateful for you, and I hope you guys have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Make sure you're on my email list so that I can keep you updated about when the Bloom Watercolor Club, when my membership is opening up in January. And I will see you guys again soon. Thanks so much. Bye.